I'm Matt Reynolds, and this is my podcast.
I can do the job, but running the business is quite difficult. What a lot of tradesmen lack, and I was probably one of them, is business skills.
I don't mind making mistakes. You learn from your mistakes.
Information is all around you in the minds of people that work beside you.
Welcome back to the Trench Talk podcast. I'm your host, Matt Reynolds, and today I spoke with Dr. John Demartini. Dr. Demartini is considered one of the world's leading authorities on human behaviour and personal development. He is the founder of the Demartini Institute, a private research and education organisation with a curriculum of over 76 courses covering multiple aspects of human development. His father owned a plumbing supply store where Dr. Demartini began working when he was just 4 years old. The idea of these discussions, for those of you joining us for the first time, is to go into the trenches of achievement and talk not with people who are orchestrating from some lofty perspective, but to those high performers who are actually in the trenches honing their craft. That has included guests from the worlds of business, sport and entertainment, all of whom are on the front lines doing amazing things. I've known Dr. Demartini for about 16 years. He's trademarked methodologies in human development, the Demartini Method and the Demartini Value Determination, are combinations of over 44 years of cross-disciplinary research and study and utilised in all human development industries across the world. Dr. Demartini travels 360 days a year to countries all over the globe where he shares his research and findings in all markets and sectors. He's the author of 40 books published in 36 different languages. He has produced over 70 CDs and DVDs and dozens of online programs covering subjects such as development in relationships, wealth, education and business. He has created, as mentioned, over 76 different courses, the most advanced of which is a 21-year correspondence course. Each program is designed to assist people to activate leadership and empower all 7 areas of their lives: financial, physical, mental, vocational, spiritual, family and social. During our chat, we covered a lot, including the early days John spent working as a plumber, one of his first businesses where he employed 9 people by age 9, cleaning and maintaining neighbourhood yards, learning to save money while building a business, thinking long-term, the 2 ways to think about delegation, why he doesn't own a phone, overcoming challenges using the Demartini Method, what happens when you die, and as always, much more. You can find out more about Dr. Demartini at his website, drdemartini.com. If you enjoy Trench Talk, head to xrm.com.au/podcast and opt in for the newsletter. We'll make sure you're notified when every new episode of the show is released. Trench Talk is available everywhere good podcasts are served, so if you're feeling super nice, please leave a review, comment, rating, or whatever your chosen podcast platform allows. Enjoy this chat with Dr. John Demartini. John, thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Now, we are in your hotel room today here in Sydney.
We created a unique little studio, didn't we?
We did. It's taken us a little bit of time to get right, but now we're ready to roll. So I appreciate you, first of all, for having me here in one of your many homes around the world. Now, me being a plumber by trade, I thought we might start with plumbing, which may be a little odd to you, but the reason is that your father had a plumbing supply store very early on.
Correct.
And you worked there?
Since I was 4.
Since you were 4. Okay, so I wanted to ask if this travelling the world, researching, writing, speaking, educating millions of people gig that you've got ever dries up, is a plan B to go back to the plumbing trade at any point and rehash things there? And if it is, would you be any good at it?
No, I'll share a fun story. My dad, like most dads, would probably be inspired to have their son take over the business. And I'm sure that in the back of his mind, he never really forced it, never really said anything about it. But I think in his mind, he probably would love to have had that happen because he built something. He wouldn't want to have it just disappear. He turned it over to another gentleman who was my age at the end anyway, so it worked out. But one day, around my 20-something year mark, I was underneath a house in a freezing cold weather. It was muddy and rainy, and I was trying to fix a pipe.
Well, I wish I didn't know what that felt like, but I do. Go on.
And I was not in the greatest of moods. And I came out of there and I said, I made my decision that I'm going to pursue what I've had in my mind. And even though I was doing that as a part-time money generator to go through school, following day I went to a hospital and got a job delivering surgery schedules to 2 of the, Dr. Demartini and Dr. Cooley, the 2 greatest heart surgeons in Texas. And I had another trajectory because I wanted to be involved in teaching and healthcare. So I went out and did that, and I'm glad that happened. It was a perfect thing to happen. But I never really went back to plumbing, and don't think I would. Not that plumbing doesn't have a massive contribution to the world, because when things aren't working right, you thank God a plumber comes. But it just wasn't for me. I had a desire to travel, and I had a desire to teach and to learn, and that was more my path.
And your dad put you to work pretty early on in life.
Yes.
Do you think that has any correlation with the work ethic that you now hold today?
I suspect, I don't know exactly. I know that my dad, when I was 9, I wanted to go. Well, my dad, at a very young age, made me quite responsible. Okay. I had to mow the yard, do the hedges, do the flower beds, shine the shoes. There's a lot of things I had responsibilities for. And I'm grateful for that, because I think my dad knew that I had learning problems and that he wanted to make me sort of street smart. So when I was 9, I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I want to earn some money. I want to buy a baseball glove and a baseball bat and a baseball, a new one, because I had this old one that was kind of embarrassing. And I said, I want to buy that. And he goes, okay, so what are you asking? He says, well, I want to earn some money. How can I do that? He says, well, have you mowed the yard? Yes. Have you edged the sidewalk? Yes. Have you swept the sidewalk in the garage? Yes. You cleaned the garage? Yes. You did the hedges? Yes, sir. Have you done all the flower beds? Yes, sir. Have you tightened all the shale on the side of the house like I've taught you? Yes. And have you made sure that my shoes are all cleaned? Yep. He said, son, I don't have anything else that needs to be done. If you've clipped everything and edged everything and trimmed everything, and if you're going to make money, you're going to have to go to the neighbors and see if you can find somebody you can help and serve. So I went down the street. I knocked 2 doors down to the Evans house. Their yard was a mess, and I thought I could do a lot with it. So I said, how would you like me to trim your yard, mow it all, trim the hedges, everything, weed the flower beds? And the lady said, well, that'd be lovely. How much? I didn't know what to say, and I just pulled a number out, probably a little low, but I said this amount. And she said, well, that sounds like a fair deal. When can you start? I said, I can start right now. And she says, okay. So I went over there and I mowed and I edged and I trimmed and I clipped hedges and I dealt with bee stings and blisters and all the stuff that come with it. Collected the money, and I immediately the next morning I went out and bought the baseball, the glove, and the bat. And my dad saw me with a baseball glove and bat, and he says, I see you have a baseball glove and bat. What did you do to earn that? How did you get that? I said, I did what you said. I went to the neighbors and I earned it. He said, son, well, what did you do for them? He says, well, I mowed, edged, and everything else. I said, what equipment did you use? I said, well, the stuff in the garage. He said, well, son, you can't just use that equipment without paying for that. Oh, well, what does that mean? He said, well, how much did you do and how much did you earn? And he charged me, money for that. And that kind of eroded the profits because I'd already spent it.
Yes.
So I was going, oh, now I owed him money, and he charged me interest on that money, on the delayed payment. And I started doing more yards, and I had to pay him that, and I had to adjust how much I had to pay him because we worked that out. And then I was making less money, but working harder, and like many people are doing. And finally, I was doing pretty good, and I had this young boy riding his bicycle along me as I was mowing the yard one day, and I thought, I wonder if he'd like to mow. I could get him to mow, and I could do a deal, and I could get him to mow. If I can get him for 50 cents, to pay him 50 cents to do the mowing, I think I could come out ahead. And I asked if he'd like to help, and he goes, yeah. I said, would you like to make 50 cents? He goes, yeah. 50 cents was significant in 1960 and 63. So I had him mow the yard, and I got another kid to help rake and sweep, and another one to edge. And then I had a couple of them that would do the trimming and stuff, and I showed them how to do it. And I ended up with 9 employees.
And how old were you?
I was 9.
9, okay.
And I ended up with 2 other people's homes equipment, the Mallas and the Zubrods. I went over to their yard and I worked with them. They talked to my dad and charged me the same amount. They worked a deal. Yeah. They got on the phone and I said, how much you charging him? So I ended up with 3 teams of 3 young boys doing the landscaping, yards and stuff. And I would collect all the money. We'd be busy during the day. Collect all the money, pay everybody off, pay my dad off, pay for the gas. And I still netted $45 one day, which is averaging around $35 to $40, $45.
Which again, at that period of time, is quite a lot of money.
Well, if you multiply that over 56 years, Oh, that's significant.
Yes.
That would be, well, you just add it up. That'd be 90, 180, 360. That'd be about $800. $800 a day. That's not bad. If your kid was making $800 a day at the time, you'd probably.
Oh, you'd be very proud of them, right?
So anyway, my dad said, son, he comes to me and he said, son, I see that you're making money and you're doing this. And he said, but I don't see you saving any of it. And he said, if you don't save it, you're going to work very hard. So he bought me a coin collection album and he bought me a piggy bank. And he said, put your coins in those two things. And any coins that don't work in the coin collection, stick in the piggy bank. And then when we get a certain piggy bank full, we'll go to the bank and put it in the bank and you'll deposit it and you'll learn how to earn interest. And I went, okay. So I did that. And I filled up the piggy bank. But then I found out that he never gave me a combination or a way of opening it. And in my office today, on the 52nd floor of my building in Houston, Texas, is that original piggy bank with the original coins from 1963.
Is that right?
The original coins are still there. And it's worth a fortune today.
Have you kept that as a reminder of those times and of those lessons? Is this
a reminder to think long term?
Okay.
And that has been a very big, significant impact on my life. Now, I eventually started saving, and he says, now, son, I want you to know what it's like to buy freedom. And every time he talked to me, it usually cost me. And I said, so what does that mean, Dad? He says, I want you to start paying for clothing, food, and rent, but now you're free to go anywhere you are wanting to go, but you have to be home by 9 o'clock at night. So you're free to do anything you want to do from the time you get up in the morning to the time you go back here at 9 o'clock.
So we sort of really linked the freedom and responsibility together, right?
He linked them together, and I had to pay him $7.50 a week, which was $1 a day, but I was making 45, so it wasn't that much.
Wasn't too bad, yeah.
And during the summer, it was a win-win. Now, what was interesting is that allowed me to get my bicycle. I bought my bicycle, bought me a golf collection set, golf clubs and stuff. And on the bicycle, I used to ride 35 miles sometimes in different directions just to go and explore the region. And then by the time I was 12, I was hopping trains to different cities. By the time I was 13, I was hitchhiking to different cities. Hitchhiking wasn't abnormal those days. And then by the time I was 14, I hitchhiked to California and down all the way to Mexico to Acapulco.
And at what point did the landscaping, gardening business start to go into decline as you started traveling?
Well, I think I used it occasionally all the way till I was around 15 or 16. And then when I moved back at 18, because I left school and left there, when I turned 18, I sometimes did those things also to make money. And I also did tractor work and plowing and bulldozing and machinery work.
So you've actually done a lot of manual labor in your life.
I was a tree chopper at one time. I was a lumberjack. So I chopped down trees and cleaned forests and then mowed fields. I've had about 70 or 80 jobs before, I was a 20-something years old.
Did you ever go back and ask your dad about the thinking behind those lessons? They've obviously served you, as you said, very well now. But did you go back later and commend him on his foresight?
I think one time I asked to get a loan and the banks wanted a co-signer on a $70,000 loan. And he said, I'll sign it, but I'm going to charge you an additional 4%. So I was paying 7.5% on the loan at the time. This is back in 1980s, early 80. And then he was charging 4%. So I was paying 11.5% for the interest. And that punished me enough to want to pay that off quick.
Yes, I bet it did.
So he was not making any money on it unless he was charging something else. So he was getting 11.5% back, and then he was keeping the money. It was a bank loan, but it was his cosign. So he was making 11.5% off me. And he was smart. And then one time, I remember when he was about to pass, he came to me and he said, son, if for some reason your mother and I run out of money before we die, can we count on you? And I said, yeah, but we'll have to do a deal where I charge you interest and you'll have to get an insurance policy to pay me back. And he says, I taught you well, didn't I?
He certainly did.
But he never did. He had enough money to take him right till death. He never had a problem, but he was just testing me out.
Yes, and you've taken your savings techniques and that a lot further now in sophistication and what you're doing. Can we cover just quickly, because this actually came up on the last podcast that I recorded, people building businesses while they save. And a lot of times we don't correlate those things, do we? We think we're spending to build a business and we'll get the money later, but you can actually do both, which is the method that you've followed.
Yeah, I teach people to do both.
Can you talk a little bit about what you do yourself and what you teach people on that subject?
There's a principle in physics called in thermodynamics called entropy. It's the second law of thermodynamics. The first one is conservation of energy. The second one is the tendency to go from order to disorder to randomness, from order to randomness, you might say. And money follows that law. And if it's not organized, it gets disorganized. And if you don't put it towards something that goes up in value and appreciates in value, it automatically goes to depreciation. And so people don't realize that in business, that if they don't put monies aside and build up a cushion of capital to stabilize volatilities in the business is mainly emotionally based instead of strategic. And unexpected bills will keep eroding the potential for what you could be saving. And I don't think people really grasp that. But if you took the average amount of what unexpected bills occurred in a month and found out what that was, because there's always unexpected bills, just about every time. If you go and find out what that average is over a period of a year per month, and take that amount and stick it into savings, because there's no risk in taking money and putting in savings because you got the money to pay the bills. And do that, you'll find that the unexpected bills go down, the profits go up, the margins get better, and you reduce volatilities. And you attract more people to want to take you to lunch and do things and invest in you, because you manage money wisely. You attract more money to manage. And so it's a principle of physics, and people don't understand it. They keep thinking, well, when I get ahead and I get a lot of extra, then I'll begin to do it. No, you get it, you do it, and then you get extra. That's how it works. That's why the wealthy have always paid themselves first, not last.
And the biggest companies, as I know you talked about a number of times, hold the most cash, right?
Well, the top 100 companies in America, they did an analysis of the cash, and Apple has got around 280 billion in cash. It fluctuates between 240 billion and 350 billion. So depending on what they're about to initiate. But when you stop and think about it, that's a substantial amount of cash. And Bill Gates kept a year's worth of income to Microsoft in liquid capital.
Profit, income.
Yeah. And he kept it in cash reserves. And at one point in 2000, he had it at 5-point-something% interest rate, which wasn't huge interest rates, but he had cash reserves. And then when the crash occurred in 2000, he capitalized on that because he had tons of cash. And most everybody else went down and they lost their business, or almost did. He didn't do that. He actually had the cash to buy cheap to make a fortune.
So what is your take on the tech companies now in the Uber model that are spending to grow?
Well, some of them are putting all their money in on the gamble that they're going to beat out the market with low prices first. Once they've got the market, then they're going to raise the prices. So they're doing a 5 to 10 year plan, and it's been very effective. But they have to have a real disruptive approach that is certain. You know, Uber had a model that was pretty powerful. I mean, it wiped out, no one was expecting that. That wiped out the taxi guys almost for a while there. The limos and taxis really got hurt because they got a black Uber that was cheaper than a limo driver. Yeah. I've been loyal to a limo driver guy that's been working with me for almost 30 years in America, in Houston. And I have now a global limo service. Now, wherever I go in the world, I call one number and they take care of it wherever it is. They have the network in every country. And that's just easier for me. And I pay probably more than I need, but it's just the convenience of calling one number and having one person who's accountable. And if somehow it doesn't work out, I've got one person I hold accountable, and they always make it right. But in those days, I think I don't think people were expecting it. And I think Uber came in and just slaughtered the guys with their prices. But what happened is they gave most of the money to the drivers compared to the thing at first, and then they worked their way back once they captured the market. And then now they charge higher fees and pay a little less for the drivers, and they're not exactly like a taxi model, because a taxi model has a medallion you have to buy that's outrageous price to be able to use that term. Yes. And that's a gimmick, and that was a little mafia-run system there. So Uber was able to disrupt the market by more effective and efficient delivery of service, and then made sure the standards, at first the standards were not ideal, but then the standards stabilized. And I think people around the world have now been using Uber quite extensively.
They have, and they've always maintained the goal, I guess, that they can switch over to a income-producing model at any time if they stop growing.
I think they had the intention of having income, but I think that what they did is they just disrupted it and kept the profit margins extremely low, and just kept making sure that they grabbed the market in the long run. The clients that they wanted, they wanted to take over the market. And then once they did, then they raised it up again. And Uber's done everything. I mean, you want to go on a boat, you want to go on a flight, soon they're going to have Virgin Galactic, you probably use Uber there too.
Yeah. It's the sky's literally the limit, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think that they've put it into different formats, like Airbnb and these are similar models, and they've disrupted the market. So I can't say that that's not been a useful thing, because I don't have a Uber, or I don't even carry a cell phone, but I have somebody that usually takes care of that for me, so I can step out and get an Uber and a black Uber and get to where I need to go if I need to. But I still have a limo service most of the time.
So I did want to ask you about the mobile phone, because I know that you don't carry one, but you are in the business of communicating with people. And I think that it's probably a fair argument to say that that's one of the most powerful communication devices on earth, right? To get right in front of people. Yeah. So why have you chosen not to use a cell phone?
I have all the vehicles of technology on my computer that I need to do.
Okay.
I do webinar jam, Zoom, and podcasts and all that stuff when I schedule it. Yes. So it's a scheduled, usually paid time use of that technology. And sometimes I'll have people come up and hold the thing up there and we'll do a little Instagram and things of that nature. But I found that many people are absorbed by their phone. I was in Melbourne, Australia recently, and I've seen the same place. I'm staying at a hotel there. And there was a table of about 15 people at a big table having dinner. And everybody was on their phone and nobody was talking to each other. They were talking to different parts of the world, which is great. I'm not against that, but I was just thinking how absorbed they are. And when you look and count the people on the street, most people are carrying their phone, looking at their phone, talking to somebody on their phone, or looking somebody on the phone, and their phone absorbs their life. And there's efficiency in it, but I've delegated everything other than what I love doing, which is research, write, travel, teach. And when I'm teaching, I don't use my phone. And when I'm researching, I don't use my phone because I've got my internet through the computer. And when I'm consulting, I don't use my phone. So the things that I do, I don't need a phone. I have people that are to pick me up. I have people to take me places. I've got it all done. It's all organized and done. I don't do anything but research, write, travel, teach.
So let's talk about that, because you have been very methodical in getting rid of every aspect of your life that you don't enjoy or want to do.
Anything that's not inspiring to me, I delegate to other people who are inspired by it.
So how exactly do you do that? Because we all have things, or at least most of us have things that we don't want to do every day, but we kind of have to do them, right? So what's the journey between that space and then getting rid of
just first get rid of the idea you have to.
Okay.
There's no should, ought to, supposed to's, got to's, have to's, or must in the world that are there except in your mind. So you don't have to do them. You could do two things. You could take that action and link it to what is highest on your values and temporarily become inspired by it by changing perception, temporarily until you can find somebody to delegate it. Or you can just go do what's more inspiring and go get somebody to do it and delegate and be accountable to produce more income by what is inspiring. Or if delegating, make sure that they produce more income than they cost. If you do those two things, you're not trapped.
So it's purely a ledger that you can keep on that and work it out, right?
Totally. It's either go do what you love through delegating or love what you do through linking. And the linking is only transient until you can delegate. But otherwise, why do something? Anytime you do something lower on your values, you devalue yourself. Anytime you do something higher on your values, you value yourself. So why would you do something less? It doesn't make sense to me.
So that's the backbone of a lot of the work that you teach. So if someone's listening or watching this today and they don't understand the main principles, can you run through that, how that actually works and the discovery that you've come up with?
Well, every human being lives by a set of priorities, set of values in their life, things that are most to least important in their life. And whenever they're doing things that are high in their values, they spontaneously are inspired from within to do it. It's very fulfilling. Like the boy who loves video games, he loves his video games. No one has to be reminded. The mama doesn't go in there and says, now, Johnny, go do your video games. Quit doing your homework and chores. No, it's the other way around. Yeah. But things lower on his values, he needs to be motivated to do. And motivation is either a punishment if you don't do it, a reward if you do it, which is an extrinsic motivation. I have no desire to live by extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation, or intrinsic inspiration, I call it, is a much more fulfilling life, doing something that you absolutely can't wait to get up in the morning and do. When Buffett says he goes to tap dance to work, it means he's going and he loves what he does. He loves reading business statements and financial statements, and he loves deciding companies. He loves investing. He's been doing it since he's a young boy. That's what he loves doing. I love researching and preparing for talks and doing podcasts and presentations, anything that would inspire people to go do something amazing with their life. I love that. Anything else doesn't inspire me. I haven't done a check writing kind of thing or looked at my bank account or balance sheets and all that stuff for probably 36 years. Okay. I gave that up when I was about 30, 29.
So you have someone that takes care of it and then you review it, or you don't review it?
I put controls in place where I don't even have to do that.
Do you have a fear at any point that whoever you're delegating it to, which we've seen in past, could take advantage of that arrangement, or not really?
No, because the way I've got it is there's forced, automated, accelerated savings and investments going out. And as long as I'm getting what I want, I really don't care. Okay. I'm getting what I want. And then what happens is I can go out and I can do presentations in a week and I can look at the numbers and everything else. I've been doing it so long that I can get it down with a very short margin of what I'm going to generate out of that. And I know what the income is. I know what the costs are. I know all those things. I've been doing it so long. So I know what's there and I know what's going to go and I know what's going into investments. So I'm not really concerned about it. I don't want to major in minor things and minor and major things. I want to go and do what I love doing and get handsomely paid and travel the world.
So you're sharing your message, you're researching at the same time, or not at the same time, but...
While I'm on a flight, I'm researching on my way to go teach. Yes. When I land, I'm teaching or researching. I mean, that's what I do.
And what are you researching at the moment?
Well, I just did a paper on polarity management, which is a paradoxical management for leaders and managers. And it dovetails beautifully with some of the work I teach in business and value structures. And I've also just done some work this morning on astrophysics because I'm also fascinated by that. They just discovered what they call a kilonova, which is a highly condensed neutron star that collided with another neutron star that generated strontium and some of uranium and platinum. Because I'm interested in some of the atomic elements and where they originate. There's Big Bang nucleosynthesis, there's stellar nucleosynthesis, and there's supernova nucleosynthesis. And I'm interested in how the Earth was formed, how life evolved on it, and I have lots of fascination, so I study a lot of fields. And that just happened to be the one I worked on this morning.
Because I read or heard recently that you were doing some work on the black hole theory.
Yeah.
Now, at the risk of getting well out of my area of expertise, what's piqued your interest, excitement into looking at that? I'm kind of interested because you do so much of this. How you work out what to study. Why did that grab you? Well, as opposed to so many other things out there.
Well, I could go on a couple of journeys on that one. When I was 17, I had a desire to want to learn as much as I could and overcome my learning problems. When I turned 18, I went to a dictionary and then an encyclopedia, and I made a list of every known ology and discipline a person could study. And my objective was to try to find the most universal laws, the most strongest, most consistent foundation of material to build my teachings with. I didn't want a fluffy thing that would come and go. I didn't want a fad. I didn't want a trend. I wanted something that was a classic. So I wanted to study the most universal laws. When I started to pursue those, I figured the most universal law would be the one that would be more applicable in every different discipline. So I first made a list of all the disciplines. Then I decided that the average PhD reads about 100 books in preparation for their PhD, to complete their PhD. And by the time you do your second, third, and fourth PhD, there's a lot of overlap. So I made a goal to read 100 books in each of the disciplines. So right now that's 300, and I've read 30,000 books. So I've worked on that all these years. So I wanted to find the common threads. Now, when I got into chemistry and physics and mathematics and astrophysics and nuclear physics, astrophysics fascinated me because it's the big picture. It's the small and the large, because the Big Bang, starting down at the quantum vacuum, is now going in and creating nuclei and super, quarks, and eventually nuclei, nucleons, and all the way to atoms, and then molecules, and then what we have. And I'm interested in those because they all play a role in recycling elements inside our behavior. We don't think about it, but our bones are filled with strontium that come from supernovas. And our enzymes come from cadmium and nickel that interfere with the enzymes. And then you got manganese and zinc and copper and things that are all involved in the various enzymes. And so our energy levels come from stellar nucleosynthesis. So as far as I'm concerned, there's not one discipline that's not related to the evolution of human consciousness and maximizing human awareness potential. So I study every one of them. Anthropology, physics, mathematics, chemistry, all of them. Physiology. There's not an ology that I haven't absorbed, and if I find out about a new one, I start on it.
And there's always something studying.
The only thing I haven't studied is cooking.
And why not? You don't like cooking?
I don't have a desire to cooking. And I've studied engineering and mechanics some, but I don't have a desire to drive. Because to me, driving would be distracting from what I want to do. I can sit in the back and write a new article on the way to the airport or do office consulting or something. I'd much rather use that time that way instead of being worrying about traffic and stuff.
And what are your thoughts on other life forms out there? Is it possible?
Well, exobiology has been a fascination of mine. I was attempted to be a special missions astronaut back in 1987, 86 at NASA. I went there, I trained, I failed the simulator tests.
Oh, is that
because I couldn't follow
test?
authority. No. A simulator test is where you're actually outside the capsule, out in space, and you're doing repairs and things. And I couldn't follow authority.
Okay.
I'm not good with obedience. I'm good with independence.
Okay.
Anyway, they laughed at me because I couldn't follow authority. They said, you'll never make it in space. So I decided to go and eventually be involved in external space exploration, which is the Ansari Prize. I was part of the people that helped on that. And for Spaceship 1 and 2, I was there at the Spaceship 1 launch. And I'm going to be at Spaceship 2 when it starts. But those are deep explorations that I've been fascinated by because I learned from Plato and from Socrates and from Anaximander that, the study of the cosmological expands consciousness to allow you to see the Earth from a broader domain. There's a thing called an overview effect that cosmonauts and astronauts have experienced when they go into space. They look back and they have difficulty judging the Earth. They have fallen in love with it. It's almost a mystical experience. And when you have a broadened perspective and looking back at it, you see things that you can't see when you're down in it. So the study of astronomy and astrophysics and cosmology, which I wrote a big 1,000-page 2-volume set on last year, and I just got invited to be in a movie with Stephen Hawking recently. Yeah, so I filmed that in London just recently. But in the process of doing it, I find that just the exploration of that expands your awareness and makes you look at the things that go on down on Earth as too trivial to react to. And it helps you have more of an objective view in life.
Just to make that really practical, it's a question I've asked before. Why can some people handle so much on their plate, so to speak? For instance, a president has got probably a lot more going on than myself, as an example. And there's people out there that, they run 7 minutes late to dinner and it throws their whole week out. So if you're the type of person who is trying to achieve things, how do you handle more on your plate? How do you get more done? Well,
what I learned from Mary Kay Cosmetics Company is a lovely lady, Mary Kay Ash, who I lectured for at the Anatole in Dallas, Texas, 35 years ago. I asked her, what advice could you give a young aspiring speaker that's traveling the world? And she said, every day, write down the 6 or 7 highest priority actions you can do that day that will give you the most fulfillment, and make sure that they're daily actions, not projects that give you goal overrun, that last beyond that day and then you never get done. But only actions you get done that day, and then commit to getting it done. And if you get it all done in part of the day, then add another one and get that done. And if you still got room, add another one. But only add what you're committed to getting done, so you practice the art of incremental momentum-building actions that build great achievements. And I did that, and I did it on index cards, and I followed that like to the letter. And then I kept the index cards, and I looked back at all of the highest priorities over the couple-year period, and about 800 cards. And in the process of doing it, it boiled down to research, write, travel, teach. That was the highest priority thing I could be doing each time. Because if I'm inspired with new information, I can't wait to share it. When I do, it helps me in marketing, and I draw in opportunities to do it. And that gives me an enthusiasm when I'm doing it, and an inspiration, and then people want to share that, and so it's my best marketing. And so I did that, and I found out what it was, and I just made a commitment to not do anything other than that, to let it go, to say goodbye to the other stuff, and find somebody who would absolutely love to do what I want to delegate and does a better job at it than me. And so the people around me are doing a much greater job than what I could do. I don't know all this stuff. I don't keep up on that stuff.
So it's just a process of refinement.
And narrow it down to what, Gary Keller in his One Thing book, which I've had the opportunity to lecture for his company, his message is very powerful. What is the one thing that you are greatest at, that you want to be the greatest at, or that would make the biggest difference, that would be most core competently driven intrinsically from within by you? I know what that is for me. It's teaching and learning.
And how did you figure that out?
I knew from I was 17, I knew I wanted to overcome my learning problems, and I knew I wanted to travel world teaching. It was an epiphany at 17, and Hasn't changed since. I still have the vision. I could show you the picture if you'd like of the vision. There's a gentleman, I was speaking in Melbourne, Australia, I guess about 8 years ago, and I was talking about that vision that night. I met Paul Bragg. And a painter came up to me, Andrew Tischler, is a famous painter, came up to me and says, if I was to paint that vision, would you allow me to do that? I go, absolutely. And by God, he nailed it. He captured the vision that I saw. I described to him what it was, and he captured it. And he painted it, and it sits in my office right now. I can show you a picture of it on my computer. It sits there, and it's me standing on a balcony overlooking a square with 1 million people in it. And in the backdrop is leading buildings from every major city around the world. And it's me sharing a message to the world. That's the image that gave me a pictorial to go after.
I've actually seen that in the background of a couple of webinars and that you've run over the years of it hanging in your office. So it must be a very inspirational thing to go
when
back.
people go in there and they see that picture, they go, whoa, that's a very inspiring picture. But that's been the vision that I've had, and I've relentlessly pursued that master plan ever since.
So you're on the road 360 odd days
Full time.
a year. The other 5 or 6 days, is there a place you call home?
Somebody says it's every day. I'm really full time. Okay. I live on this ship called the World. Been on there for 18 years when I'm there. Most of the time I'm traveling hotel to hotel and speaking. But sometimes I'm on my ship. I was in my ship in Japan just a few weeks ago. And I'll be back there in Vietnam and then Cambodia and then Hong Kong on it. But it travels around the world, and I get on and off it as I travel. If I'm in the area, I go on. If it's not, I just stay in hotels. The universe is my playground. The world is my home. Every country is a room in the house, and every city is a platform I get to share my heart and soul. That's my affirmation since I was 20. And the world became my home. And it even advertises every country is a room in the house without even them knowing that I had been saying that since I was 20.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that bit.
Yeah, I was brought to tears when I heard that. I was going, whoa, that's what I've been saying inside my head. I must have matched it up pretty good.
Because you were involved in the original building of that ship, is that?
No. In 2001, when 9/11 occurred, we were living in Trump Tower. And we had the 62nd floor there. And my wife felt awkward by being there after 9/11. She said, I want to go back to Australia for a while. So I told her, I said, I'm not scheduled to go to Australia. So if you're going to be living in Australia, I'm not going to see you. So we got to come up with plan B. So for an anniversary present, I got her the condominium on the ship so she could be traveling around the world and I could have a higher probability of running into her as I travel.
Oh, okay.
So we had a global jet set gypsy life. I write for Jet Set magazine, which is a magazine that goes to 250,000 private jet set owners and jet owners. And so we're jet set people. So
the speaking, the consulting, the work that you're doing, what's the most common challenge that people want to solve when they come to you?
It really quite varies. Okay. I mean, there's some patterns, but because I have background in healthcare, I get asked probably once a week or every 2 weeks, I'm dealing with a major health issue. Dealing with what do I do in this health concern, or who do I see, and this is the prognosis, what's going on, and my background in that. Business is probably 60%, I'd say, some business-related issue, and then relationships is another issue, and business and finance is about 60+%, and then relationships are big things on conflicts in businesses between companies, or I get a lot of those. And then just entrepreneurs wanting to start their business, I get consulting on that a lot. But I think that the most common thing that I get in business is there's a challenge on staying steady and having less volatilities, anything to make a consistent steady, how to break through plateaus when you've been for a period of time just kind of hitting the same wall. So clarity, consistency, reducing volatilities, expanding. And then some are starting businesses, and others are conflicts of once a business partner, no longer a business partner. These kind of conflicts are very common because some people get married in their business for whatever reason, and then they end up having a divorce. Sometimes there's financial issues that they don't realize that they don't really have the financial savvy that they thought, or the value structure that they need in order to build wealth. And they thought, I'm now dedicated to business, but I'm now working and I'm not making anything out of it. They don't realize that that's the way it's structured. It varies. I can also have celebrity issues that people have had slams in the media. They're wanting to know, how do we deal with that? Or they were big at one time and they've calmed down and they're trying to get back in the game. I mean, I've had every imaginable issue, traumas, shootings. I mean, I've dealt with all kinds of stuff.
And you're using the Demartini Method, as you've obviously named it. Can we go a little bit into what that involves? Because this way of thinking, I've got to say for myself, is probably one of the most significant things that I've learned, probably in my life, to be quite honest, with how to deal with challenges every day. And not in the sense that I do the full process that you teach with some of these bigger things, but even when little issues come up, because I understand the thinking, the methodology, if you want, I can pass through these things probably a lot quicker than what I could in the past. So can we talk a little bit about what that is?
Well, the Demartini Method was founded really when I was 18, started. That was the beginning. Right before my 19th birthday, I received a magnificent gift from my uncle, who was a professor at MIT, physicist, chemist. He sent me 2 giant crates of books to my parents' house. And I opened those up with a crowbar and filled my room with books. And one of the books he sent me was by Paul Dirac. And Paul Dirac was a Nobel Prize winner that gave rise to the idea of particles and antiparticles, which is mainstream quantum mechanics today. He said that there's never a particle without an antiparticle, and it created a symmetry principle based on that, and that they were entangled and they related to each other at quantum level. And he showed in his book that if you take a particle and antiparticle, in his case a positron and electron, which is a positively charged electron and a negatively charged electron, and slam them together in some sort of accelerator, that they'll birth light. So you can take matter and antimatter and convert it back to light and follow Dirac-Einstein's equation that Einstein said that E equals plus or minus mc squared, right?
Yes.
So that means energy can be converted into matter, matter can be converted into energy. Well, particles and antiparticles are matter and antimatter. They convert into energy, which is light. So when I saw that and I read that, I was just fascinated by that. I thought, how is that occurring? Because the entanglement came about out of that, out of 1935 study. And I thought, I wonder what happened if positive and negative emotions were to be slammed together and entangled together. Could they make enlightenment?
That was your idea, just that came to you? And
It just came to me when I was 18. And I thought, what a cool thing. And so I went on a pursuit to study everything and anything I could get on that, which led eventually to a very deep and very powerful method today that's being used around the world. But I then also had a book that was given to me by the German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. He had a discourse on metaphysics, theodicy, and monadology text. And I read Discourse on Metaphysics. In the very first chapter, first paragraph, he talked about a higher order, a higher perfection than what our sensory world will allow us to believe exist. And he said that there's a higher perfection in what's going on that we don't see it. Our biased animal behavior wants to avoid pain and seek pleasure and wants a one-sided world, but there's a higher order to a two-sided synthesized world, which matched Paul Dirac's idea of the synthesis. Then I read Zeno, the philosopher, in about age 20, and read the origins of the dialectic. And I studied Plato's dialectic use and then Hegel's use of it and others. And Hegel basically said that the thesis and antithesis, if it's synthesized, it was a spiritual experience. Well, that's matched all 3 of the other sources. And so I said, well, but the dialectic is an oscillating dynamic that goes through time and is segmented and has a causality limit. And then Jung came along and introduced the idea of an acausality. Him and Wolfgang Pauli, the Nobel Prize winner, came along and said, no, there's an acausal state that transcends linear time and entropy, the source of entropy. And then I read Girolamo Cardano and his work on square root of -1, which is a mathematical entity that opened up to probability statistics and quantum theory. He's the really founder of the quantum theory back years, decades, centuries ago, actually. And he was a gambler, but a probabilistic guy, and he believed that was the secret to knowing God. And so I thought, wow, if I could tie together kind of a spiritual and a material synthesis and take science, religion, and philosophy together and merge them together with one methodology, that would be very intriguing. And since I'm a polymath and I studied all these different disciplines, I was able to put this baby together. And it was the column 6 and 13 of the multi-column system of asking questions is probably my greatest contribution in my work. Okay. And it's the realization that the mind, for centuries, and even to this day, some neuroscientists believe you can't think of 2 things at the same time. Even the Necker cube, when you look at it, you see 2 different angles, and there's a bias going on. But the actual truth is you can see both at the same time. And there is a superposition. And the computer today just proved that computers are available now, but it's been going on in the mind. And I found a way of accessing superposition in the mind. And that was a breakthrough. So we have now access to a transcendental state of the mind over the normal immanent polarities of perception that are stuck in this dialectic. And that's a very profound thing. And I've developed a model and a series of questions that you've been through, at least the first 14 questions of it, of the 80 questions that are involved in it to help you see the hidden order in your life. So no matter what you've been through, there's nothing your mortal body can experience that can't be turned into thank you, and to see the hidden order in it and actually be graced over it. So I found a way of taking whatever happens in your life and turning into a almost mystical experience using a scientific method.
And I've been through that process at the breakthrough experience with you, and it's a very eye-opening and emotional
experience. It's hard to put in words, too.
It is, yeah. And to understand the other side of every event when you can be so emotional, charged up about it, it does take a bit of work, right? But if you can, I guess for me daily, that if you understand that's how it works, you can get there a lot quicker. Whereas there's probably, I guess you come across it all the time, right? People that don't even know that that's the other side of the equation is actually something that you could love and appreciate.
They're fundamentalists out there. They're absolutists that believe that there's black and white and there's no gray. They think something is bad and it's bad and there's no good in it, or this kind of thing. And the whole illusion is neither. There's neither good nor bad in it until you narrow your mind and make it so. Yes. And then you end up realizing your narrowed mind is what made you have the emotions that are running your life. And so by broadening the mind and having an astronomical view, you transcend that label and liberate yourself from the bondage of those infatuation resentments that occupy space and time in your mind and run you.
So have you ever struggled yourself to use your own method on one of your own perceived issues or problems?
Absolutely. I've had many times where I've had my buttons pushed and I go, whoa, I wasn't expecting that one. And I had unrealistic expectations or delusional perceptions, some sort of a unrealistic expectation usually. And I have to go through and pull out my method and use my method. It's like anybody else.
Does it take time though?
I'm pretty quick at it because I've done so much of it, but sometimes I have to sit down and contemplate what's the benefit of that or what's the drawback of that and neutralize it out.
And you get quicker over time, I'm assuming, right? So.
Well, if you don't use it, you lose it. But if you use it, you master it like anything else. I mean, I work with it every single week because I do the training programs on it, and I do 50 weeks out of the year, or at least, I'm doing that training with breakthrough and prophecies and things of that nature. And so I guess you just get pretty proficient at it after a while. And you've seen so many thousands of cases that you know patterns that are in nature.
And it speeds up you helping people through.
Yeah, it speeds up so I can help people through their stuff pretty quick.
Yeah. Do you, again, changing tracks, life after death, what happens when you die? This is a question that's come up for me. Well, not for me, but it's been a topic that's come up and we've discussed. So are you a believer that our souls are reincarnated in another body, or once we're done, are we done? Do you have any thoughts on that? Because of your study and research in that space.
I have a 10-day course I do on science, religion, philosophies of the world where we address that. First of all, we have to go back to define what is life, which is a very interesting question. I wrote a 2-volume set called The Mysteries of Life and the Origin of Life, trying to solve that problem. But I was talking to Freeman Dyson at the Institute of Advanced Studies, who took over Albert Einstein's office in Princeton when Einstein passed away in 1955. I asked him what happens to intelligence if the universe was to expand, which is just a model. It's not the truth. It's just a model. But if the universe was to expand indefinitely and we were to have thermodynamic equilibrium and heat death, what would happen to all the information and consciousness, if you will, that's emerged?
Okay.
And he said he believed it would be stored in charged particles of light. And I said, well, everything that I've studied, it points to that. And charged particles of light is the very starting point. And so charged particles of light are positrons and electrons, really. Yes. That's basically the same thing. And it stores information, and quantum computers are now showing that. So when we die, and I've worked with 3,587 cases of death so far. I'll have another one this weekend. It is very evident that your physical body undergoes entropy, and the organs start to decay. They acidify, saponify. Bacteria start to consume and break them down and use them as food. We're basically bacterial food. all of our
eventually ends up as dust, right?
well,
Or almost.
sometimes it's dust, sometimes it's living organisms. Most of it's living organisms, bacteria that eventually get eaten by something else in the food chain. But eventually we're turned down to bones, and bones are either fossilized or they're demineralized and recycled, and everything is recycled eventually. So there's nothing that's not recycled. The elements, solids, liquids, gas, and plasma pretty well recycle themselves. Then there comes the intelligent factor that we have to say that either emerged or concomitantly interacted and animated the body. That information appears to, by doing the Demartini method, appears to be emerging around you in different people. So what I do is when somebody dies, I ask them, what are they grieving the loss of? And they go, well, this and this and this. And it's always things that they admire. And then I said, okay, now who is now providing that? One or many, male or female, close or distant, virtual, real, self or other? Who's now emerging those behaviors? And that the energy of that behavior, since it's conserved, where is it now gone? And I show them very simply, within a short few minutes, where and who has taken on that trait the moment they passed. In every case. I mean, I've got a track record of it. It's been researched at Yale University, and it's been shown and proven. So that means that the actual activity and energy and behavior was conserved and is picked up by the people. And when that's picked up by the people, then they're animating it now. So even though that physical body turned to dust, you might say, and recycled its elements, the activities and the behaviors, which is sort of like a conscious conservation, is now picked up by other people. And when that is identified quantitatively first, so it's equal, and there's certainty about the equality of that, I go in there and neutralize the infatuation on the first part and the benefits of the second until they're flatlined, until it's qualitatively in equilibrium. And the moment they do, there's no grief. It's a very pure science. You saw it. And there's a realization of the presence of the animation of the life that was once in this individual is now dispersed to one or many people. It's called the law of the one to many. It goes from one to many at death and many to one at birth. And so in a sense, it's a micro dispersion of a reincarnation kind of construct, but it's not usually identifiable by people because they don't know how to ask the right questions. So that most of the constructs of eschatology, which is the study of afterlife, is based on fear of loss of something, which I can dissolve, or contemplations of the fear of extinction. And so most of the models that are out there used in religion are basically compensatory to us not knowing how to deal with ourselves at death and our fear of loss of immortality. But we can easily see that the energy, the information, the animation, and the atoms are conserved and recycled. And so when that person then picks it up and starts animating it, and then they die, somebody else picks it up. So it's still conserved and recycled.
So a really practical example of that would be maybe a father in a family dynamic passes away very early, and then you have the son or daughter rises up and becomes the main income earner and provider for the family, which has come up on this podcast a few times. And
or another man shows up, or an uncle shows up, or a grandfather steps in, or somebody else plays that role, or it could be the son.
And is that instantaneously?
Happens the moment it's happened. There's no loss.
Like energy, right? Sorry, you got to think this through.
I first got exposed to this when I was 14. At 14 years old, I left. My parents gave me a ride to the freeway with a notarized piece of paper saying I wasn't a runaway, I was a boy on a dream going to surf. And they dropped me off for the freeway, Interstate 10, and I hitchhiked to California. When I got to California, I was at Huntington Beach, California, sitting on the front end of my surfboard, looking at the sun getting ready to go down, as waiting for the waves to glass off and the offshore winds to come back. When that occurred, I was just about to go out, and all of a sudden this lady comes up behind me and says, "Are you a runaway?" And I said, "No, my parents dropped me off on the freeway." And she goes, "Where are you? You got a place to stay?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm going to stay on the beach here." She says, "Well, you can't do that. There's a curfew here. You have to go down to the cliffs to stay." Cliffs are down the beach, walking distance from the Huntington Beach. And she said, "So do you need a place to stay?" And here's this really super hot, like a 10 on the Richter scale girl who's 27 years old telling me, do I need a place to stay? And I'm thinking, of course, man, I'm not going to pass that up. So I follow this girl back to her place, which is a few blocks. And she says, if you take your clothes, I'll wash them. And if you go take a shower, I'll cook for you and I'll have some food for you. And then we'll have a chat, get to know each other. And I'm thinking, this is like magnificent, right? So I go and shower and come back and we have dinner and we chat, talk about our lives. And I decided it's about 9:30 at night. I'm going to go up the room, and I was staying in a waterbed up in this attic at this place. And I was going to go to sleep, and I was going to get up at 5 and go out and surf early in the morning. Well, she cleaned in the kitchen and clinker and clanker and everything else. And then all of a sudden I heard somebody come up the little step up into the thing, and she gets there and she makes love with me. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a pretty good deal. A beautiful 27-year-old at 14 or at 65 is still beautiful.
Yeah.
and I thought, wow, this is pretty good. This is a free love days, 1968, right? So I made love with her and everything else, and we had this fantastic deal going. And then I realized after chatting with her that she had a husband in her life that left her with her son, who was 4. And if you added the age of the 4-year-old and her husband's age and add them together and divide by 2, that was my age. And if you took my mother's age and my average girlfriend's age, added them together and divided by 2, that was her age. She was playing the role of my girlfriend and mother, lovemaking for the girlfriend, and cooking and cleaning and everything else as the mother.
Yes.
And I was the son that she would take care of, and also the husband. And that was the moment I started to go, this is interesting. Nothing is missing here. I'm getting everything I need. And then I hitchhiked down to Mexico later that summer.
I was going to ask, how many years did you stay for?
I wasn't there. I actually brought another girl to that place. I didn't let her in the room, in the house, but I kept her outside. And the girl came home and saw me with another girl and got jealous. And that was the end of it. But because I didn't know that she'd be a jealous wife.
Yeah.
I just thought,
yes.
Okay, free love days. But then I hitchhiked down to Mexico, and I remember I was going from Mexicali to Sonoita, and a van picked me up, a Volkswagen van with a man and a woman and a daughter who was my sister's age, and the mother and father were my parents' age. And they picked me up, and I thought, I was starting to get the idea that nothing is missing, I'm being taken care of. And I started trusting the universe in providing whatever I thought was missing, it wasn't. And instead of getting attached to the form, I started honoring the transformation. And I still say today that the master lives in a world of transformation. The masters live in the illusions of gain and loss, because whatever they get infatuated with, they fear the loss of, and whatever they resent, they fear the gain of. And they live in the fear of gain and loss instead of the magnificent world of transformation.
So if we think of a celebrity, a high-powered business person, and we want to be like them or have their life, whatever, what are we doing? What sits behind that? How does the dynamic work?
Well, anytime you perceive somebody that you admire and they're like a hero and somebody you put on a pedestal, that's because you're too humble to admit what you see in them is inside you. Now, at the level of the essence of the soul, this is a Jewish scholar, philosopher, Moses Maimonides. He says, at the level of the essence of the soul, nothing's missing in you. At the level of the existence of the senses, things appear to be missing in you. Every time you judge somebody and look down on them, you're too proud to admit what you see in them is inside you. And anytime you look up to them, you're too humble to admit what you see in them is inside you. But in fact, you can't judge them unless it's reminding you of a part of you that's inside you. And so if you are admiring them, the question is not how can I someday be there? The question is where and when do I display and demonstrate that same behavior and wake me up to the realization that it's not missing in me already? And then once you do, you level the playing fields, and they're no longer up here. You're there with them. And I use that tool in training celebrities and sports people and big business people and wealth people. And it's very powerful. And so I think that's what got me the opportunity to be with that movie with Stephen, actually.
So this is a good reminder for me, so nothing's missing.
We go around, and I've been teaching the breakthrough experience for over 30 years. And I have had every imaginable 100,000 different variations of people's issues that have come in there. I've yet to see something that somebody can perceive in another individual that they don't find inside themselves.
If they look hard enough.
I went to the Oxford Dictionary many years ago, and I went in there and circled every word that described a human behavioral trait. There's another axiologist and traitologist that actually did that since that time. I did it earlier than him. But he also found around 4,000. I found 4,628 traits in the Oxford Dictionary that human beings could display. I then went out into the margin. I wrote the names of the individuals that I thought displayed that trait the most that I've met, real life people. And then I went and looked inside myself, and I found out where and when I demonstrated it until I owned it as much as I saw in the most extreme example. And I realized that there was nothing missing in me. I'm nice, I'm mean, I'm kind, I'm cruel, I'm generous, I'm stingy, I'm giving, I'm taking, I'm positive, I'm negative, I'm peaceful, I'm wrathful, I'm open and closed and honest and dishonest. I had every single trait that I saw in that dictionary. And instead of me trying to get rid of half of them, I looked at the benefits for the things I thought was negative and the drawbacks, the thing I thought were positive. And I transcended the labels of them and allowed me to be me. Because otherwise you're trying to get rid of half of yourself, trying to love yourself. And you can't love yourself if you're trying to get rid of half of it. And you're trying to love the world and you can't do it trying to get rid of half of it. Therefore, the moral constraints of a narrowed mind limit us from a transcendent awareness that sees things through the eyes of love.
So it's perception. Reframing the perception is the key.
Well, it's the questions you ask that reframe the perception. Your intuition is always trying to reveal to you the unconscious side. So if you're infatuated with somebody, you're conscious of the upside, you're unconscious of the downsides. If you're resentful to somebody, you're conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides. Your intuition is always trying to reveal to you the unconscious, to make you fully conscious. So if you ask questions that are in line with what the intuition is trying to prompt you to do, you liberate yourself from the bondage of the emotion and become aware and awakened and fully aware. And full aware of actuality is far greater than the local realities that we get ourselves trapped in.
A system for getting the answers.
Yeah, it's a system. So it's the quality of our life based on the quality of the questions we ask. If we ask equilibrative questions that bring equanimity and equity, amazing life emerges.
So I want to be respectful of your time so you can get back to your research. So just a couple more questions and then we'll start to wrap up, because I could sit here for a long time and ask you many more questions. But one that I do ask everybody, if you could have one law changed or implemented, what would it be?
Yeah, nothing to change.
Nothing to change?
No, I don't think there's anything. Yeah. I think that there's a gradation of awareness in society. And I'll use it in this context. Imagine you're in elementary school and you're in a biology class or a science class. And the professor goes up there with a stick and he points up to above the blackboard. I guess they still have blackboards now. They have electronic boards. And you see this little ball there that looks like a hydrogen atom. Then, right, it has helium, and then it has lithium, and then beryllium, right? Barium or whatever. And it just goes up the list, beryllium, and up to carbon, oxygen, et cetera. Okay. And it goes and eventually gets to uranium. And they may not have the transuranics, but they got the uranium there. And there's 92 little balls up there. They're all different, gradually increasing sizes based on the orbital SPT or orbitals and things. And you were taught in school with the stick figures and balls that atoms are little spheres and balls. And you believe that when you're in elementary school. And you think of a little atom that has a color and it has a this and that. And it does have a spectroscopic color, a signature frequency based on each electron shell, et cetera. But then you go on to high school and you find out the Niels Bohr model. And it's a stage of development where now you find out that it's like little orbital systems, like a solar system, and there's little electrons going around a nucleus of protons and neutrons. And you don't know anything about them except now you've got little balls with going around balls, and it's in orbitals. And if you move that orbital fast enough, it makes a sphere that kind of looks like a ball. So you think, okay, it's a little bit more abstract. You're now looking at it from a little bit more mathematical perspective than a tangible phenomenological perspective. And then you go, wait, it's not finished there. And then we go into college. And then you start studying quantum mechanics. And you find out that it's probability distributions. The s orbital is a probability distribution and a spherical distribution of various radii around the center point where this electron could be. And then you realize that it summates to our perspective as a ball, but it's actually not even an orbital thing. It's a mathematical entity. Okay. And it's just a probability distribution, building on complex mathematics, which are the square root of -1 against the real numbers. And so you go in there and look at that and you realize, my God, I was told the illusion until I was ready for that. Then you go on to professorship. You go on to get your college degree, and you go and become a professor. And then you work on the pitfalls of the theories, because the theories have little problems. Infinitesimal point source particles. They supposedly have infinite energy. They can't. They have finite energy, so they have to extrapolate with renormalization to get those pinpoints. So you have this construct that, oh, wow, we really don't have that thing that's a probability distribution. It's a mathematical entity, but that's still got little flaws in it. Then you go on and get your professorship, and you're a professor emeritus maybe, or get a Nobel Prize, and you're working at the cutting edge, and you realize it's purely a mathematical entity. There's nothing tangible at all. It's just a mixture of what we think is energy and matter's energy, and energy is matter, like Einstein said. So we had to be taught the illusion until we're ready for truth. And I found that in every ology that I studied. Every ology has gradations of awareness that has to be taught the illusion until people are ready for truth. And most people are caught in a polarity initially, and they play with the dialectic, and the dialectic of the opposite viewpoints fight with each other in arguments to eventually synthesize and find out that it transcends what their beliefs were.
Your favorite book or documentary?
Well, the favorite 2-volume set book is Syntopican Volumes 1 and 2 by Mortimer Adler, produced by the Britannica series under the Great Ideas series. 2 best books that I encourage anybody to read. It's a PhD in life.
Is it still available for purchase?
Yeah. You can get it. It's a masterpiece.
Okay.
I encourage everybody to read those 2 books.
I will add that to my list. Now, if somebody wants to get in contact with you, John, drdemartini.com.
drdemartini.com. They can just go and learn. You can spend the rest of your life on there learning.
Yes.
Enough to keep you busy because there's enough going on there fast and you can probably keep up with it. And they can also do the value determination process, which I would encourage them to do it now, a week from now, a month from now, a quarter from now, and every quarter, to watch the evolution of what's really priority to them and keep current with it so they keep living by priority. And take advantage of all the educational materials on there, all the podcasts, webinars, the radio, television, newspaper, magazine articles, which are by the thousands, and all the events that I'm doing around the world live. Take advantage of them.
Come and see Dr. Demartini at some point, because it's quite special to see you talk and the depth of knowledge that you have. And I was pretty nervous doing this interview, I must say, because I knew I was well out of my depth in many sections of that. So you're an inspirational guy and a fantastic speaker. So I encourage anyone to get out to one of your events and
thank you.
And have a listen, because it, as I said before, has made a big difference in my life, how I see things and move through challenges quickly. So I want to thank you for all that you do, for taking the time today to spend with me in this in one of your homes in this makeshift studio, and hopefully we've produced something that is of value to everybody out there.
Well, your questions were fabulous, and so I'm certain that it will be thought-provoking at least, and hopefully inspiring at most. And so thank you for caring enough to do that.
Hey everybody, it's Matt again. Thanks for listening. Just a couple of things before you guys clock off. You can get all Trench Talk episodes at xrm.com.au/podcast. You can also sign up for other goodies at the same site. Just plonk your email in there and you are covered. That's X for X-ray, R for Romeo, M for Mike.com.au/podcast. If you really like what I'm bringing you, please head to iTunes, subscribe to this show and leave a review right there. And lastly, if you want to contact me directly, type the @ symbol followed by Mr. Matt Reynolds into your search bar and you'll find all the social links. Goodbye.